what if I fail. This has such a negative connotation. It's more of a what if things don't go as planned. Let's call it that. Hey guys, welcome back to Verse of the Week. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I was going over some of the videos that have come out over the last couple of weeks, and there were a lot of questions that I put forward for you guys to work through. What I want to do today is more of a touching base and just going back to some of the questions that we have been reflecting on over the last couple of Verses of the Week videos. Recently, in one of the sermons that our church put out, there was a quote that really stuck to me, and it says, I wrote it down to make sure I didn't screw it up. It says, goals don't determine success, systems do. I started to think of all the times that I have set a goal for change in my life, and then I either walk away from it because I get overwhelmed or I forget about it, or I fall flat on my face and then I'm like, what's the point? I already failed. And so instead of standing up and continuing to pursue that change, I usually change directions or just abandon it completely. So if you've been processing a lot of the questions I've kind of given you as homework per se, or as part of your devotional, I just kind of want to work off of those for this week. And that's kind of going to be our God time and our devotional time. Now, the first thing that I like to do when I've written out some changes I want to work through is go back and reevaluate. Sometimes we make very emotion-driven decisions, which don't necessarily have a good track record for having good outcomes. See if there's anything that you want to readjust. Is there anything that you want to change? And if you are happy with what your goal is or what your desired change is, then we can move on to part number 2 of this video. And part number 2 has a lot to do with the steps that you are going to put in place to walk towards the change that you are desiring. So if that is starting a new hobby, how are you going to find a group that does that hobby? How are you going to develop the skill that hobby requires? How are you going to finance that new hobby if it's something that's going to cost a little bit of money? One of the things that I myself am working on is being less reactive. I found that during this, I say this time of quarantine because everyone's been quarantining. I've been working. But during this time, I have found that I can be very emotionally reactive when I feel that individuals around me are making commentary that perhaps isn't the wisest or the most educated, especially when it comes to do with healthcare or medical procedures or physiology, things that I kind of work in or know quite a bit about or have studied. I've been getting very angry. So I've done well at holding back and taming my tongue, but it's a quality that I actually don't like. And it's something that I want to work towards sharpening and kind of redefining a little bit and bringing God into it, because God hasn't been part of my anger reactions. Confession. So with this goal in mind, or with your goal in mind, how are you going to set it into motion? One of the things I'm going to start to do is anytime that I kind of feel an emotion start to rise up, my first step, before I even try and like analyze the person's perspective, just make that decision to hand over the anger that I feel rising up or the frustration that I feel is starting to take over, and just give that over to God. And that essentially removes the power and the drive of that emotion and puts it in a healthier place, right? It puts it in the hands of God at the foot of the cross. And it gives me a moment, or it forces a moment for me to stop and check my emotions and check what is going on. Now, the second thing that I'm kind of putting in place is kind of a place or a way for me to kind of check in with myself. So how will I know if I'm making progress? Sometimes, because we're so critical of ourselves, sometimes we're actually making progress in certain areas and we ourselves don't see it. It's very easy for me, in a state where I'm not frustrated, to say, oh, well, when the emotion comes, I will give it to God. It's a lot harder to actually do that. So one of my ways of checking in with myself It's just seeing how much time is it taking from the moment where I'm like, okay, this is frustrating, to the moment where I'm like, God, I choose to give this to you. These emotions, I put them in your hands. Please lead me in how to deal with them, or how to react to them, or how to work through the current situation. The goal for me is for that time lapse to get shorter and shorter as I kind of work towards my goal, because sometimes I can be flustered and angered and complain to my husband and just vent, and I'm just going over scenarios and responses I wish I could give, and how I wish I could just put people in their place with a little education. That's not healthy. It's not godly. So my goal is to eliminate all of that mumble jumble that essentially just raises my stress levels, and be able to make that transition from sensing I'm upset to giving it to God a lot sooner. So how I'm gonna measure my progress is through how long that time lapse takes. Now, the next thing that has previously been something that kind of derails me or has made me walk away from a goal I've been pursuing is what I consider failure. So if your goal is to work out every morning 4 times a week for a half hour, and then you have a span of like 4 days where you don't do it because you're in a mood, you're not feeling well, your schedule keeps being disrupted. Suddenly, we go into this failure mentality and we're like, well, I haven't done it for 4 days. What's the point now? I'm already off track. I can't catch up. This is too much. I have failed. And we kind of derail ourselves with our own thoughts. So something that I've tried to be more aware of in my goal setting is a little section that I call, what if I fail? So what steps am I going to take if I fail at, reaching step 1 in my goal acquisition, so that I stay on track and I'm not just giving up and getting frustrated. And it's not even what if I fail. This has such a negative connotation. It's more of a what if things don't go as planned. Let's call it that. Sometimes when we feel like we failed and then we try and overcompensate for that with more pressure, we essentially just keep feeling like we failed twice as bad. So it's good to just have little steps in place as essentially as a safety net, so that you're not totally falling, right? Something catches you. And now the last thing that I want to mention is consistency. Consistency. So consistency is something that I find very hard, because I attribute consistency to essentially an equal output of energy, if that makes sense. Whereas sometimes consistency has nothing to do with the energy you put out and everything to do with whether or not you're showing up. And it's about not criticizing ourselves when we don't hit the benchmark we think we should be hitting. It's about just being appreciative of the fact that our heart was able to show up, that our body was physically able to take us there. Even sometimes that you were mentally able to kind of resist an urge or resist a temptation. And it doesn't matter if you cross the finish line covered in mud and clothes ripped. It matters that you did your best to cross that finish line that day. So those are kind of the thoughts I want to leave you with today. I didn't want it to be too overwhelming. I kind of wanted to just bring it back to what we've been talking about and make sure that we're not just kind of forgetting about the things in our lives that we've been trying to focus on and trying to bring goals and change into. And just remember that quote, goals are great, but it is systems that determine our success. So if you're finding that you are not attaining the goals that you have set for yourselves, regardless of what area of your life they are in, go back and check the systems and the steps you have in place and maybe reevaluate that, instead of feeling like you have to reevaluate your whole goal completely, or like you have to, start over fresh. Redo your steps, redo your systems, and go from there. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on a comment below. Would love to continue our conversation there. And otherwise, I will see you guys for another verse of the week or quick chat with Ashley on our upcoming video. Stay safe and be blessed. Bye.